Good evening, this is Brown at IF Brown. Tonight we're going to be talking about True Detective Season 2 on DVD. So True Detective was a very popular show that HBO put out, and it was an anthology series for the detective and crime dramas. So basically, you had each season would tell a different story with a different cast of characters. And season one was basically kind of a smash hit, and it was a hard act to follow. So when season two came out, a lot of people didn't like it. It seems like, but I think over time, people have come to actually embrace it as a good season with some great things going for it. But it's just that it had the misfortune of having come after season one, which was basically flawless. And so you could argue that had season two come out before season one, it would have been embraced as a great a great season. It's just that with things having being reversed, season one in season two's place would have been better, but since things are the way they are, you got a season that suffers in comparison. But in my opinion, season two was actually great in its own way. I mean, season one is still better, but I honestly think that in a lot of ways, season two was more grounded in reality than season one was, because season one, there was a bit of a supernatural element to it that gradually became more pronounced as the series reached its climax. And I honestly really enjoyed that aspect of it, and so did a lot of people. But season two, though, it's more, the supernatural element's gone, and it's more straight up human evil. You got, political corruption, murder, extortion, bribery, things like that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and the basic setup is that this motorcycle officer named Paul Woodrow, played by Taylor Kitsch, finds a dead body on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere at night, and basically this dead guy, was a guy named Casper, who was involved with a lot of movers and shakers in the city. And by the way, the story takes place in the fictional city of Vinci, which the show creator, Nick Pizzolatto, he actually based it on a city named Vernon in California. And basically Vernon, apparently has a lot of corruption going on in real life, or at least it did at the time of this show that the show came out. But anyway, Vinci, though, was basically a city that was founded on corruption, and so this guy Casper was involved with a lot of movers and shakers of Vinci, and his death puts a lot of plans in turmoil. And everyone's you got all these people trying to figure out, okay, who killed Casper and why, and also how much do they know about all of us? So these other people get involved. You have a guy named Frank Semyon, played by Vince Vaughn, who is a former mobster who is trying to become legit, and he has a wife named Jordan, played by Kelly Riley. But she and her character of Jordan and Frank Semyon, basically they're a very loving, loyal couple to one another, but unfortunately their life is kind of scarred by the darkness and corruption of Frank's semi former life as a gangster. But Casper was a very important player in Frank's plans, and he had a lot of Frank's money in hand. And so, his death, basically throws that into complete chaos. And then you have the character of Detective Ray Velcoro, played by Colin Farrell, and Detective Annie Bezzerides, played by Rachel McAdams. But these two detectives, they're both very flawed individuals, and they both have, some form of trauma that, they've been scarred by, and, they've been, basically, tainted, by, the darkness that, they've come into contact with, but in different ways. And so they're both good detectives, but they also have a lot of baggage. Velcoro had actually been working for Frank because, years ago, Velcoro's wife had been attacked and raped by someone. And Frank Semyon's people reached out to Velcoro, and, Frank, talked to him and said, hey, it sucks what happened to your wife. This is the name of the guy who did it. Go do what you gotta do. And hey, you might get a call from me someday. And so Velcoro went and killed the guy who raped his wife. But having done that, as a law enforcement officer, he basically, put himself into a position where, Semyon was able to blackmail him into working for him as kind of a henchman, on the side. And so, he's got that going on, as well as an ongoing custody battle because he and his now ex-wife, there's a lot of, drama going on because their son may not be, Velcoro's. It might be, the child of a rapist. And so, there's, all this, drama going on with his character, plus the fact that, all this, negativity has, led him to rely more and more on alcohol over the years. So the guy's not in a good place. And Bezzerides, her trauma is, very different because, something happened to her when she was younger. Something that, basically involved abuse. And as a result, when it comes to her interactions with men, she has a very, very, I guess you could say, contentious, relationship with men in general. She likes men, but she also hates them because of what happened to her. And so, she has this darkness about her that, basically, scares a lot of people away. But she does, actually, care about, doing the right thing, protecting the innocent and what have you. But it's just that she doesn't see herself as innocent any longer, and she sees no point in trying to, pretend like she's innocent. And so, the nature of her job, interacting with, the harsh reality of, the world around her, plus, her baggage from when she was younger, it basically makes for a very cold and, distant individual. But so you basically have all these individuals, all these characters sort of, being brought together by the mysterious murder of this guy named Casper. And so, the whole thing is, okay, this murder set everything off, but, who killed him, and, why, and, who's trying to screw over who. And so that's the basic, setup of the story. But I should mention that Paul Woodrow, Taylor Kitsch's character, he has his own particular baggage because it turns out that before becoming a police officer, he had actually been, I believe he was an Army veteran, and he had actually served as a mercenary for a group called Black Mountain over in the Middle East. And while he had basically served America, there was some illicit activity that had been perpetrated by this group. And, he's, in a spot where, because it's military, he can't talk about it, but he also doesn't really want to talk about it. And so he's got a lot of baggage from his time in the military. You got physical scars, but you also have mental scars. And this is a semi-spoiler, but it turns out that Woodrow is actually gay as well, and which makes things, a bit confusing for him mentally, because, socially speaking, he's very repressed. Like, you wouldn't know he's gay to look at him or anything like that. He doesn't, like, he's not effeminate at all, but he even has a girlfriend. But it's a very strange relationship that he has with her, because he's very, like, he likes her, but he's very distant with her. But because of some stuff that happened to him when he was younger, sense a pattern here. So basically some stuff that happened to him when he was younger, plus his time in the military, he's really far into the closet, so to speak. And he can't really be honest with himself about who he is. But he's very good at his job, when it comes to, say, doing his job as a police officer, but also when it comes to, say, combat situations. He's probably the best guy of this particular group. But each one of these characters has some serious baggage that makes their personal lives quite chaotic, unfortunately. But that's one of the things that I think I liked about this show, because there were some similarities in that regard to season 1, because the main characters on that show, had very messed up personal lives as well. But these characters, while they have that much in common, all their personal lives are messed up in different ways. And so it's not like they're all just, copying each other or anything like that, but, you see that these are all unique characters, and that all of their problems are unique as well. And so, you're at a point where, in some ways, and with some of the characters, you're rooting for, instead of, say, straight up heroes, you're kind of pulling for characters who would be considered, anti-heroes or anti-villains even, because, some of them are more corrupt than others, but they've all got something to hide. They all have skeletons in the closet. But, one of the things I liked about it was that, two of the characters in particular, Semyon, as played by Vaughn, and Velcoro, as played by Colin Farrell, both of those guys, both those characters, were probably my favorite ones, in the sense that, they do very morally reprehensible things, but then you also see them at times in which they're trying to improve themselves. And so it's like this tug of war, but I guess you could say spiritually, and psychologically. It's like, they've done so much bad, is there really a chance that they could actually, I guess, turn things around and become good? And, because of the nature of the story, as well as the setting they're in, unfortunately, that may not be an option at this point. And of course you have, Woodrow, who, as far as, say, Velcoro and Bezzerides are concerned, the guy's a military hero. he doesn't have jack to prove to anyone, but unfortunately, because of, his, situation, the fact that, he's questioning he's in, denial of his sexuality, as well as, the stuff that happened, during his time in the military, he has his own baggage to deal with. And so while he's not corrupt, you know, he's not exactly in a situation to where, he can, hold his head up high, so to speak. And Bezzerides, I wouldn't say she's corrupt, but unfortunately she's, made a lot of enemies, within the department, because of how she, treats people. And so, and while it's understandable as to why she keeps people at arm's length, if she keeps them, close to her at all, it's just that, she doesn't distinguish, between friend and foe when it comes to her interaction with men, it seems like. And, anytime, one of the characters, gets close to her, in some way, it's a major mark in progress, because, of the type of individual that she is, and the fact that she's able to, let certain characters get close to her, at any point within the series, or this season, I should say, it says a lot. And so you see that she's trying to, in some ways improve herself, but primarily by trying to help other people. And so, just even the characters that aren't necessarily corrupt are, struggling with, their own issues, and they're not able to live a happy or fulfilling life, unfortunately, because of that. And so I liked how they were all in this sort of whirlwind of, uncertainty together. But I mean, you could say the same thing about season 1 as well, but this season just felt a lot more grounded in that regard. But I really liked, in particular, as far as the acting goes. I mean, Vince Vaughn, of all people, I mean, most people are going to, think of him as that guy from the Wedding Crashers, or, the Interns, or something like that. But, he had some very serious acting chops here. And I bought, the fact that he, was playing a gangster. And, excuse me. But, he played, he was really good in the role of, the gangster who's, trying to, become legitimate, and, basically trying to build a life for him and his wife, but who, unfortunately, he can't just, turn it all around. He's, just done too much evil, unfortunately. But there are times where Vince Vaughn is straight up scary in the part. And then there'll be times where, he's trying to help someone out, and it's like you see that there's a good guy in there, but unfortunately, because of the circumstances he's in, the bad guy has to be front and center. So to see Vince Vaughn pull off that kind of character was a major surprise, at least in my eyes. And so people who say that, Vince Vaughn can only do comedy, check him out in True Detective season 2. You'll see. And Colin Farrell, for me, I was never a huge Colin Farrell fan. I mean, the guy can act, but I think, the movies I saw him in, he was basically, just cast in a part because he was very handsome or something like that. But I mean, I liked him in Phone Booth, but at the same time, I just, I didn't like his character, but I thought he did a good job. But it seemed like he could only play that kind of character, from what I saw. But then I saw him in this, and I'm just kind of like, man, you got a very nuanced role here. I mean, because you got this guy who's basically at war with himself. And I mean, yeah, the alcoholic detective is kind of a cliche in a crime drama, but I mean, he pulled it off though. I mean, you understood why he was basically drinking himself silly, and while at the same time, you bought the fact that, he loves his son, and there's nothing he wouldn't do for his son. But I mean, there are times where, in his zeal to protect his son, he kind of scares his son, because his son sees this darkness within his dad, and unfortunately, it's a darkness that's been with his character for quite some time, and it's a part of him that he struggles with every day. And so you see that there is a good guy there, but unfortunately he's basically sold his soul to I guess you could say everyday evil, and as a result he's not able to, he can't go back to the good person that he used to be, unfortunately. Although there are moments where that good person does come out. But as the season goes on, though, things happen to where, he has to stop drinking. Like, he has to, take better care of himself. And, or the way he puts it is, he wants to stay angry. If you drink, you don't get angry. At least he doesn't get angry if he's drunk. But if he stays angry, he stays clear-headed, and so that actually helps him to stay clean for quite some time. Much to everyone's surprise. But no, he actually did a very good job in the part, and I was very impressed. And even people I noticed that did reviews on this, they tended to single those two particular actors out, Vince Vaughn and Colin Farrell especially. I mean, while they definitely praised the other main actors, Vince Vaughn and Colin Farrell were easily the best of the actors. And Rachel McAdams, she was. It was hard to, because she did a good job in the part, but it was kind of hard for me to like her. But at the same time, I think that might have been the point of it. And only as you learn more about her, and as she gradually lets some of these other characters in, you see that you kind of get a glimpse of, I guess you could say, the person she could have been. And so there's definitely a strong sense of tragedy about her. And so while I may not have liked her, say for instance in a social sense, or I guess you could say, I definitely understood why her character was the way she was. And I think in a way that probably came across it as a very realistic performance for, I guess you could say, a realistic type of character. Because I mean, every day we come across people who we don't necessarily like on a social level, but at the same time when we find out things about them, we are like, okay, at least I can understand why you are the way you are. So it was that kind of takeaway for me with her character. But she was pretty good in that sense. And Taylor Kitsch, I mainly remember him as Gambit from the X-Men Origins movie, the Wolverine one. And I know he was in John Carter, but I never saw that. But yeah, so seeing the guy who played Gambit and the type of role that he's playing in this particular season, it was kind of a surprise for me. Because I mean, on one hand, Taylor Kitsch, I mean, he can easily sell the sort of badass persona, in the sense of, because his character was a soldier, and he's probably the best one in a combat situation throughout the season. You definitely bought that with Taylor Kitsch playing him. But then when you added into the whole aspect of him struggling with his sexuality, or at least in denial of it, there were moments where that anguish really came out, so to speak. And it surprised me. And so I just I hadn't seen Taylor Kitsch in a lot of things, but I didn't know that he could pull off stuff like that. And so whereas say all the other actors were sort of revelations in the way that I guess you could say they were gradual revelations, Taylor Kitsch I guess in its own way, was a gradual revelation as well. But they were all in different ways. And so I think that's one of the reasons why, I remembered the characters as well as I do for this particular season. But I guess the other thing is that, the nature of the crime, it felt, I guess you could say in some ways, it's less, it's not quite as, viscerally horrifying as it was in season 1, but at the same time, I felt like in some ways, with the way the real world works in terms of, the corrupt being in power, a small, financially well-off minority, basically pulling the strings, and, the less well-off majority, tend to be the ones who suffer for it. That's basically the kind of city that, the setting of this season is in. Excuse me. Vinci, that's the kind of place it is. And there are a lot of places like that, unfortunately. I mean, you look at the news, you listen to people talk from, other places, and, you realize that, this kind of corruption, it's been around for quite some time, and, it probably is going to continue to be, regardless of, who's in charge. And it's just, a sad fact. And I think, this season did a really good job of, I guess you could say, conveying that sense of hopelessness, and the detectives, or at least the main characters, because not every single one of them is a detective, but the main characters, the most they could do was go through, the motions of, playing their parts in the story, trying to solve the crime, trying to solve the murder, trying to get, their lives back on track. Excuse me. But it's like they're aware of the bigger picture in some way, in the sense that, there's all these different parties who have ulterior motives, a lot of secret handshakes, a lot of backsliding, a lot of, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, look the other way, here's some money, that kind of thing. It's just, there's a lot of stuff like that going on. And while the main characters are aware of that, they can only focus on certain parts of it, because it's like if they focused on it too much, I mean, they would see just how hopeless the situation is. And deep down, they already know it's hopeless, but they, they can't bring themselves to confront the whole structure of it, because they know it's going to overwhelm them. So they do what they can, and any more than that, though, they know it'll destroy them. And so I thought that was, I'm not going to say it's like a horror story, but it's a horrifying element in its own way. And so, I actually did appreciate that. It's like, it's the kind of horrifying element that you find in a good crime drama. When you see just how, big evil is. And while you might be able to delay it, or, take out certain, representatives of it, you're never going to be able to truly defeat it. And, I think that's what, season 2 was going for, and just, not, unfortunately, not everyone's going to, come out alive, if they come out at all, And so, yeah, this was a very interesting season. Very different from season 1. It's more, crime drama. It's more of a straight up crime drama, I think, than season 1 was. But at the same time, there are some similarities in the sense that you have some very damaged characters who are serving as the protagonists. And there's kind of a slow burn approach to things. So when an action scene does happen, I guess you could say it stands out all the more. For case in point, there's a massive shootout in episode 4, and that there's kind of a build up to something happening, but when it does happen, it's like it catches you off guard in the sense of how brutal and sudden it is. But it. I guess you could say it's similar to season one in that respect as well, in the sense that when something sudden or alarming happens, it stands out simply because you know that it's building to something, but it's not like it's happening every time you turn around. It just when it does happen, it just catches you off guard with the intensity of it. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and give season two 5 out of 5 stars. Not as good, not as great as season one, but great in its own way. So also I should mention the music in this season was very well done as well. And much like I believe Leonard Cohen was the guy who did the main theme for season one, but he does the main theme for season two as well. It's a song called Nevermind, and once you hear it, you can't get it out of your head. But if you watch the season and you listen to the lyrics of the song, it kind of goes well together. And also there's a musician named I think you say her, it's Layra Lyan, and she's a musician. I don't know much about her, but funny thing is she actually plays a musician in a bar that Velcoro and Semyon frequent. She's got a guitar on the stage, and she'll be singing a song that somehow it kind of ties into with what's going on in the episodes. But you also hear some of her songs as an artist in the background sometimes, and I think some of her music, it really stood out in the final episode. And so you have they did a really good job of having the music fit with what was going on, so I really appreciated that. But yeah, this was an excellent season in its own way. And also, any fans of David Morse or Rick Springfield out there, they have brief but important roles in the season as well. David Morse actually plays the father of Bezzerides, and basically, he's sort of a spiritual, leader, I guess you could say. You could almost say he's a cult leader, but it's more of a spiritual commune type situation. But I hadn't seen David Morse in anything for a while, and so seeing him in this part, I was like, that's it's sort of kind of a reminder that he how good of an actor he was, even in a brief supporting role. But yeah, you see his interactions with Rachel McAdams' character, with him and Bezzerides interacting with one another, and you can definitely understand why she hasn't some of the issues that she does. But I mean, I will say this, while abuse was involved in her childhood trauma, he wasn't the one who did it. It was someone else. But unfortunately, because of his passive nature, he wasn't as on the ball on things that he should have been. He should have been doing a better job of keeping an eye out on her, and than he did when certain things happened. And so it's like that's basically been something that's driven a wedge in between the two of them for quite some time. But yeah, so David Morse, seeing him in that part, he did a really good job, and it was a welcome surprise. And Rick Springfield, yeah, the guy who did Jesse's Girl, he has a sort of a cameo as this corrupt doctor who practices psychiatry, but he he's not doing it to actually help people. He's doing it to control people, and whoever has the most money, they're going to get his services. But seeing Rick Springfield play that kind of part. It was kind of darkly comical, because it's a very dark setting, but to see him playing that kind of role, it was kind of funny though. But he did a good job in it. So so there you go. But yeah, that's my takeaway for season 2 of True Detective, and hopefully this review has been helpful, and y'all like what you see here, want to see more, hit that like button, and please consider subscribing. I hope y'all enjoyed it, and I hope y'all have a good night. Take care. Bye.